And welcome back to Stream City Radio, streamcity.org, as we take a look at the Big Ten versus the SEC in non-conference play. Talking about the big argument between the conferences and college football in general is, has the Big Ten caught the SEC, and has it supplanted it with dominance? Well, I think the second one, the SEC is not as dominant as it was. That's a given. But 3 championships might speak to that with the Big Ten, but none of the other numbers do. So while, yes, the Big Ten may have caught the SEC, that's what we're talking about in the radio show and the podcast, is where do all the conferences really stack up? But as far as the dominance that the SEC had, no, they have not reached that yet. It's been a nice run by the Big Ten, and it definitely has taken away the notion that the SEC is just completely dominating college football. But as far as the best conference goes, that is a different debate that we're having and breaking everything down here on the show. And basically, for those of you who may not have watched one of these episodes yet, I'll give you a quick recap of how we are getting these numbers, because I'm about to throw a bunch of them at you. We put all the teams into tiers by conference. So in other words, the Big Ten, the top 2 teams are tier 1, next 2 teams tier 3, so on and so forth, down to tier 8, with the exception of, because they're a bigger conference, tier 4 and tier 5 both have a third team. We did that with all the conferences. With the group of 5, we started out with the American Conference at tier 5 and worked our way down to tier 11. And with everybody else, we started at tier 6 down to tier 12. So that's how we are getting these numbers. And for example, Georgia playing Marshall in the opener. That was a level 10 versus level 1 team. Georgia starts out at 3 because they're giving away 9. They win back 13 points because they have a 38-point victory at home, end up with a total of 16. Example 2, Georgia and Georgia Tech, neutral site game, A1 versus 3. So Georgia's giving away 2 points this time. They win by 7 on a neutral site, earn back those 2 points. So that's a push for the 2 conferences. Nobody gets an advantage. Yes, Georgia got the win, but when we're comparing the conferences, that is a push. The third one, Texas at Ohio State. Here's a tier 3 playing at a tier 1 that wins by 7 at home. You get 1 point for a home win. You gave away 2 for being 2 tiers higher. So that's actually a slight victory for the SEC when we're comparing the conferences, because it's a tier 3 winning at a tier 1. There we go. That's what we got. Had that been at on a neutral site, it's a push. And if it had been at Texas, it's a slight win for the Big Ten. So that's kind of how that all shakes out. So we looked at the top half. We're going to look at the bottom half of the Big Ten, and then we're going to do a deep dive into the numbers and what they truly mean. And as I said, you've got 3 teams starting out in tier 5 for the Big Ten, and that is going to start out with Nebraska. And they put up good numbers in this one. They played Cincinnati, which looked like a better deal for the Big 12 maybe than it was, because everybody thought, well, Cincinnati's going to be a lot lower than Nebraska is, and the 2 conferences didn't work out that way. They both ended up as level 5 teams. The 3-point victory at a neutral site gets you a point, so Nebraska ends up with 13 out of, so just above the median level for the 3-point victory at a neutral site. Akron rolls in, you just beat the living tar out of them, 68-0, 5 versus 8, so you're giving away some points there, but you're going to get the maximum of 15 for the 68-point victory, so you end up with a total of 24 out of 24. So you basically wipe the board with Akron and put up a big goose egg in their column, so a massive win for Nebraska. Total of 18.5, which is a phenomenally high number for what we're doing here. Next up, Northwestern. A 23-3 road loss against Tulane. Now, Tulane starts out as a level 5 because I had the American a tick higher than the other group of 5 conferences. So it's a 5 versus 5. So you're not giving up any there, but you're losing 6 for the 20-point loss on the road. You end up with 6 out of 12 points and start out in a pretty big hole, which you make up for the following week, or back in October 4th against Louisiana Monroe, a 42-7 victory for Northwestern in that one. It's a 5 versus 12, so you're giving away some points. You're going to win 11, so you end up with 16 overall, does Northwestern, and you end up with an average of 11 for your point total. So just below where you want to be at 12. 12's the median. You're just below the median at 11 is Northwestern. And your third and final team in the Big Ten Level 5. And this was a disaster for everybody involved except the teams playing against UCLA. UCLA, an awful. As I said, in the last episode, everybody's going to have a hard time reaching what Illinois did on the positive. People are going to have a really hard time reaching what UCLA did on the negative. Start out with Utah, a 33-point loss at home. It is a 5 versus 2, so you're getting a couple points there, but you're giving away 12. You end up with a sum total of 3. A astronomically low number in that one. Do a little bit better on the road against UNLV the next week. This 5 versus 8 matchup. It's another loss, 30-23, the final in that one. You are giving away, you're going to lose a point for the 7-point loss on the road. You end up with a total of 8. And last but not least, well, this is the least. New Mexico rolls in and beats you by 25 at home. Now, the only saving grace here is that this is a 5 versus 6 matchup, so you're not giving away a lot of points. But you end up with a sum total of 2, or an average of 4.3 in your non-conference games. That's going to be tough. That's going to be tough to match, and leaves you and really draws down the number for the level 5 teams in the Big Ten. Moving on to level 6, and here we have Penn State, who did really well, put up another big number. They take on Nevada in the opener, and it's a 6 versus 11, 46-11 victory. And this is kind of a little skewed because Penn State was a healthy team at this point, had their coaching staff intact, looked like a national contender, didn't finish that way. But nevertheless, we can only take the numbers we have. So that puts them in a 6 seed, or level 6 team, which is going to help their numbers. 6 versus 11, you get 11 points for that victory. You end up with a total of 18. Florida International, another in this 6 versus 9 out of Conference USA, a 34-0 shutout, win another 11 points. This time you're not giving away as many, so it's a 20-point victory. You end up with 19. Another really good number for the Big Ten in that one. Then Rutgers, the other level 6 team, they take on Ohio, 34-31 victory. This is a level 6 versus a level 6 at home. No points for it, so you end up with even though you won by 3, comparing the conferences, it's a push because Ohio at the top of the MAC, and Rutgers just a little below the midline at a level 6. The only thing I might do different in this situation is, to be honest with you, I probably should have put a couple more levels in there and dropped the group of 6 down a little bit lower. In the future, I would probably do it that way because I think some of the numbers end up a little skewed. But that being said, this is equal for everybody. So 12 points for Rutgers. It's a push. No win for either conference. Miami of Ohio is your next victim. It was a 45-17 victory. You end up winning. You're only giving away 1, and you get 9. So it's a 20-point deal for Rutgers. So you end up with 16 overall, which is another really good number. Dropping down and looking at level 7 out of the Big Ten. And you start out with another Miami of Ohio game, this time Wisconsin hosting Miami of Ohio. And it's a Tier 7 versus Tier 7. You win 17-0, 5 points for the home victory. So you end up with 17 total. Middle Tennessee comes in. It's a 7 versus 11. 42-10 victory this time, 32-point victory. Earns you 10 points. So you end up with a total of 18. Then it's the trip to Alabama. Doesn't go well, but it's not a complete disaster. 38-14, 24-point road loss. You lose 7 points for that, but you were getting 5, so you end up with 10. So that's a situation where, yeah, Alabama has a 24-point victory, but it only ends up with 2 because you were supposed to beat Wisconsin. So that's the method to my madness as we look at this. And Wisconsin, another one of those teams that played no FCS schools. Michigan State, the other level 17, they play Western Michigan, 23-6. In this one, it's a 7 versus 6. So actually Western Michigan giving away a point to Michigan State in this one. So you end up with 18 total for the Spartans. Boston College didn't go quite as well. This is a 7 versus 8. So Michigan State's giving up the point. It's a 2-point win at home. You get nothing for that. So you get 11-point total, but you still end up with a 14.5 in your overall score. Looking at Maryland. Play Florida Atlantic, 39-7 victory. It's an 8 versus 9. You get 10 points, so you're at 21, another huge number for the Big Ten. Northern Illinois comes in. This one, a win, but only 11 points. It's an 8 versus 12. You get 3 points for the victory at home, end up with 11 total, so just below the median line of 12, but gives you a nice 16 number as your overall. Purdue, the final team in the Big Ten, gets Ball State. Big victory here, 31-0 shutout, an 8 versus 11. You get 9 points for that. 18 is your big number when we look at it after you gave away the 3. So 18 points there. Then you play Notre Dame. And in the reality, much like the Wisconsin game, this is a game that Purdue's not supposed to win. It's not even really supposed to be close, and it wasn't. 56-30 the final in that one, but it's an 8 versus 2. So you win back 8 points in that one. You were getting 6, so you end up with a 10 total. So how does all that stack up? What do all these numbers mean? I just threw a ton of them at you. And when you compare the conferences tier to tier, as we did with the top, and that one kind of split, 2 for the Big Ten, 2 for the SEC. Tier 5, the SEC put up a 14.3 on average. The Big Ten put up an 11.3. So that one goes to the SEC by a good margin. And this is the first time we've seen either conference, and it will be the only time nope, that's not true. It's the first time we've seen one of the conferences below the median line. Tier 6, so we see it again. This time it's the SEC with an 11. And let me check that number real quick. And the Big Ten is putting up a 17.5 in that situation. And I'm wondering here. Yeah, 11.3 actually for the SEC. So that one, obviously, going to go to the Big Ten. The only thing I'll say about that particular one, this is the only comparison where one of the conferences has nobody from a power conference. None of the teams from the Big Ten, neither one of them played anybody from a power conference. So they put up a 17.5, but it's all against Group of 5 competition. So that would be the only caveat I would throw on that. Then when we look at Level 7, that's a 14.75 for the Big Ten and a 16.5 for the SEC. So that one goes back in the SEC's column. And then the final group Level 8, is 15 points for the Big Ten and 15.35 for the SEC. So where do we end up with? We end up with 4-4. 4 for the SEC, 4 for the Big Ten, and the levels. And now, while the SEC took the bottom two, the Big Ten took the top two. So I think the argument with the SEC has always been it's that bottom portion of the conference that makes it so much more difficult. And they did finish higher in both of those bottom two sections, although the very bottom section was very close. Where do the numbers come from? What are we kind of looking at with overall on this thing? When we look at the SEC's record overall in non-conference play, and this is where the wins and losses start becoming a little bit bigger part of the conversation. The SEC went 41-8 overall for a .837 winning percentage in non-conference games, regular season. The Big Ten went 29-10 for a winning percentage of .744. This is where it starts to skew in the SEC's favor, though. The SEC went 10-6 against power teams with a .625 winning record. The Big Ten was 5-7 with a .417 winning percentage in the regular season. When we look at the group of five, both of them did really well. SEC at 933, the Big Ten at 889. But that's a pretty major discrepancy from what the Big Ten did against the group of five and what they did against the power conferences. So they're making, their numbers are really close when we look at the overall as we're going to continue to dig through this, but they're doing more of it against the group of five. When we look at the numbers of comparing where everybody shook out as far as what I've put together here. Overall, the SEC went 33-10-6 against the number, against the median. So they had 6 games that ended up at 12. They had 10 where they ended up on the bottom side, 33 where they ended up on the top side for a 734. So 73% of the time, the SEC was on the right side of it. The Big Ten, while they had more big-time wins where they put up huge numbers, not on the positive side nearly as much. Only 22-16-1 in non-conference games for 577. So when you compare those and take just the numbers out of it and look who ended up on the right side of it, once again favors the SEC. Against the power teams, the SEC played 16 power conference games. Everybody played one. And they went 11-3-2 against the number. 2 pushes, 3 losses, 11 wins for a 750 winning percentage. The other side of that was the Big Ten. They went 3-9 against the number for 250. So that greatly favors the SEC. When you look at the SEC and Big Ten against the group of 5, the SEC went 24-5-4 against the number for 757, so almost the same percentage as they did, just slightly higher than the power. The Big Ten massively higher, 722 with a 19-7-1 record. So once again, kind of talking about, the Big Ten likes to say, well, the SEC plays a bunch of powder puffs. The way it's working out is that is where the Big Ten's making their hay. Is everybody's playing up. Everybody plays the group of 5. Matter of fact, the SEC played more group of Power 5 teams than the Big Ten did, and the Big Ten's got 2 more teams. So overall, the overall score, as I said, for the SEC was 11-3-2, 750 winning percentage, 13.2 the overall number they put up. The Big Ten against the Power was 2-9 with a 250 winning percentage and 11.58. So below the median. How'd they do head-to-head against the other conferences? The SEC and Big Ten, for these numbers, when you look at the regular season, it was 2-1 SEC, but the SEC won all 3 of them by the numbers. with a 13.7, when the Big Ten coming away with a 10.3. How did they do against the other conferences? Against the Big 12, the SEC put up a 16.7 and went 3-0. The Big Ten went 2-2 with a 12. Push, dead even, right across the board, even with that crushing that they put on Oklahoma State because Utah returned the favor against UCLA. The ACC, the conference that actually performed the best against the SEC, they had a push at 12, and actually most games played 10 against them, ended up with a push, driven mostly by Florida State beating up on Alabama, and then Louisville crushing Kentucky at the end of the season. So you end up with 12. So you're a push, even though you got a winning record against the ACC. The SEC was a push. That's the only place the Big Ten did slightly better. Ended up 12.3. So just barely. That's like one game. They were 1-2 against the conference with a 12.3. So that's basically 1 point higher in the whole thing in between the three games. So when we look at that, to me, when you look at every data point we put out there, the only place the Big Ten is hanging with the SEC is the number of tiers that outperform the other one. They were both 4-4. When you look at it through the lens of the power teams, it changes a little bit, and the SEC gets an advantage there. If you look at level 1 teams, the SEC had a push with 12. The Big Ten had an 11. Both only played one game. Indiana and Ole Miss did not play. Ole Miss did play somebody out of the. I've got a flaw in my sauce there. Let me look up here. No, I take that back. Ole Miss did not play a power team. They were the only SEC team that did not. Everybody else did. Level 2 goes to the Big Ten, a 14.5 over a 10.3, thanks to Alabama and their lovely work. Then it is a 10.5 for the Big Ten in level 3 with a 13.5 in the SEC, so that one goes to the SEC. Level 4, back to the Big Ten, a 16. Level 4 for the SEC is a 15.5. And then in the level 5 teams, that is a 15.5 to an 8. And that is thanks to UCLA and the fine work that they did. So that goes to the SEC. A 9.7 in Tier 6 is not great, but it's better than the Big Ten, who had a 0. They didn't play anybody. So that one goes to the SEC. A big, huge advantage here at level 7, a 10.5 for the Big Ten, an 18.5 for the SEC, and it was a push in the bottom level where they both had a 10. So that's, when I look at those numbers, the SEC is still the better conference. Top to bottom, across the board, the SEC is the better conference over the Big Ten when you look at the numbers and you dig deeper into them. Now, it's not the divide it was 15 years ago or even 5 years ago, but it still favors the SEC. We'll come back to the radio show in just a moment and do some rank 'em, the bottom 10 and best 10 non-conference performances by the Big Ten. And but for that'll wrap it up for the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll come back on Friday and take a deep dive into the ACC and how do they stack up against these two conferences. And is there the gap that people think there is? Everybody says the Big Ten and the SEC are miles ahead of the ACC and the Big 12. Is that really true? We'll dive into that on Friday's podcast. The top half will drop on Friday. The lower half will drop on Saturday. Top half of this show drops today at 5 o'clock. The bottom half will drop tomorrow at 5 o'clock as well. Enjoy your day, my friends.